So, most people will remember the New 52, that big, grand, very badly conceived reboot DC Comics did. What you might not remember is that they released a lot of comics during that. Like, I think they tried to have 52 comics running at one point. It didn't really work, and a lot of those books kind of got lost to the ether. And I want to talk about some of them. This is more or less a look at books that were short-lived and aren't really discussed. It's kind of vaguely capped at books with 12 total issues, but that is not really a hard and fast rule. Multiple books here have like 11, not 11, like 13 issues. There's one that has 14. Some of these are minis, some of them are ongoings that didn't make it. For the minis, I'm mostly just talking about the ones that aren't really ever discussed at this point, the ones that disappeared from memory. There are a few books that are a little weird in terms of placement. My Greatest Adventure, which is a 6-issue book without the New 52 branding. It isn't a New 52 book and is a pretty clear holdover of pre-crisis stuff, so I'm not talking about it. However, I will be talking about Huntress, which also kind of fits that, but is clearly canon to the New 52, and Shade, which is in the same category, but I want to talk about it. So I'm including both of them. This isn't really a recap or anything. This is more a series of short reviews. For a lot of them, there really isn't much to say, but there is one in particular I think I'm barely scratching the surface of. It is one of the worst comics I have ever read. Probably about the same level as Marvel, if you want a reference point. I will be talking about that one last. I do not think I have done it justice, as a heads up. I do not have a lot to say about a lot of these. Some of my thoughts can be summed up in a sentence or two. Some of them are a bit more involved. I've tried to truncate them when I can, so this doesn't get too long. This is a bit more casual of a thing. I'm just going to give that a shot. Want to tell you that right away. Anyway, let's get into this, because there's a lot. Up first, we have Aquaman and the Others, which is a team book focused on Aquaman. I am someone who quite likes Aquaman, especially post-Flashpoint Aquaman, so maybe a little surprising to find out I've never actually read this. I've been aware for a while about it, but I've never actually read it. This book ran for 11 issues, 12 if you include the Future's End tie-in, and was written by Dan Jurgens with art by Lan Medina for the regular issues and Sean Chen for the Future's End issue. To probably nobody's surprise, this book follows Aquaman and the Others, a group of people with Atlantean artifacts. They're all pretty alright, but they are pretty inconsequential. I don't think any of them have appeared since Rebirth. Actually, that's a lie. I think one of them had a cameo in Doomsday Clock, of all things. Anyway, I mentioned Future's End earlier, and this will not be the last time I talk about Future's End. This is the last time it will be relevant to the main story of a book, however. This entire run is connected to it. The first issue is marketed as a lead-in. The lead-in is just that a woman has a vision of the bad future in Future's End, and Aquaman and the Others are trying to find this woman. She is the dead sister of a different team member from the main Aquaman book. That's just the first arc, is dealing with this, finding her, or fighting the villains that abducted her, and then being saved by a clone of the other dead member. After that, we have the Future's End tie-in, and since this is the first Future's End tie-in of the video, I'm going to just kind of explain what they are really quick. It's an event that takes place in the future, and a bunch of the tie-ins just show a picture of the future. A lot of them are just really uninteresting, and they never amount to anything. They are super inconsequential, and there are quite a few in this video. I'll basically say something along the lines of, it is whatever, and I do not care for all of them. Then, after that issue, there is a little arc where they deal with KG Beast, Cheshire, and the clone of a dead member situation. It's alright, but personally, I think it's a little hampered by the fact that I know it doesn't go anywhere, and it probably wasn't meant to be the conclusion. The villain's plan is just to hold the world hostage with nukes. It's not all that interesting or even cool of a plan. It's just kind of generic. I think I like this arc a little more than the other parts of the book, but it's really nothing spectacular. This book also has an issue you will hear again, which is that it doesn't have a lot of time to do what it wants to do. This is a repeat issue for some of the books in this, especially the shorter books. Generally, if something wasn't meant to be a mini and is less than 10 issues, or even about 10 issues, it will have this problem. This is not as pronounced as some of the other books on here. I think of the books I think have this issue, this is the one that definitely suffers it the least. But even if I don't mention it, this is kind of a repeat thing for a lot of these books. But to be honest, overall, I did like this. It's nothing spectacular, but it's pretty passable. I'd say it's not really worth going out of your way to read it, but if you want to, there's far worse things you could read. Up second, we have The Shade, and as I said earlier, it only sort of counts. It doesn't really have the New 52 branding and is dubiously canon to the post-Flashpoint universe and the pre-Flashpoint universe at the same time. I want to talk about it, though, so I am. This is pretty firmly a New 52 era book, the entire thing coming out after it had already launched. It's a 12-issue book written by James Robinson with art across those issues by Cully Hammer, Darwin Cook, Javier Pulido, Jill Thompson, Fraser Irving, and Gene Ha. Story-wise, this book follows Shade over a series of adventures. It starts with a plot to kill him, which then morphs into him dealing with a man named Darnell Caldecott, who is his great-grandson and is dying. This is interrupted by a flashback to 1944, where he works with a couple of people I will talk about in a minute. This issue also details his first meeting with Darnell. Darnell wants his blood in the hopes it'll get better for long enough to figure out what's going on with his company. In order to find blood, he goes and works with his adopted daughter, a Barcelona-based superheroine and vampire named La Sangre. She has a collection of samples, and he wants to see if she has some. We get her backstory, and they team up to fight her archenemy, the Inquisitor. After this arc, there's a flashback, this time to Paris in 1901, where he fights a demon that's possessing his grandson. Following this, he returns to London to figure out who's using Darnell's company to deal with higher powers and is also trying to kill him. Same person, Dudley Caldecott, another one of his descendants. He's working with a man named Miles St. Aubrey and a bunch of other people. Together, they control some interdimensional entities posing as ancient Egyptian gods. They're referred to in the book as the Celestial Pharaohs. They're using the gods to make their business do better. He tricks two of them into giving the gods some of their power back, which the gods obviously use to escape and kill a bunch of their controllers. Shade manages to transport them back to their dimension where they face certain death. Then he kills Dudley. Last issue is then an origin flashback. It's just alright. This book is also kind of funny because, as I said earlier, it is very clearly a holdover from pre-Flashpoint. If it is canon to the New 52, it canonizes a bunch of small things that are kind of funny. Two of these are the characters he works with in the flashback issue. The first is Madame Fatal, a middle-aged man who dresses as an elderly woman to fight crime, and is someone who I can't seem to stop talking about. The other one is the Golden Age Vigilante, which is probably the one you're familiar with, unless you're thinking of the Peacemaker one, because that's a different guy. And also canonized Mikhail Tomas, the 1970s Starman, referenced Kong Gorilla and Skataris, and a whole lot of elements of Robinson's Starman that don't really mesh with the New 52. Stuff like Bobo Benetti, Jack Knight, Simon Culp, or the Ludlow family. Overall, though, I'd say this book is pretty solid until the Egypt stuff, where it falters a little. That stuff before that is much better, with the Barcelona bits being the clear highlight. Throughout the whole thing, the writing is solid enough and the art is good. I will say that I'm a bit predisposed to like this, though, because I very much like The Shade. Captain Atom is a 13-issue book written by J.T. Kroll with art by Freddie Williams II, and it stars the titular character. This book isn't the most interesting thing in the world. The first bit of the story is just him losing control of his powers and learning that using them can kill him. Then there's some volcano stuff, and there's powers development. There's one issue crossover with the Flash. He gets taken and intended to be used as a weapon of mass destruction by General Ealing, but he escapes. There's this weird organic mass thing that was a rat that he fights. And there's a pretty okay time travel story. And then the book just kind of ends with this weird storyline where he gets the ability to make a duplicate that appears human, and he starts bringing his supporting cast's desires to life. and he just ends up leaving because he thinks he's a danger to Earth. And then the final issue is his origin, which they explored elsewhere in the book in a different issue and did it better there. So, okay. The art for this book, though, is quite good. Story is fine. It's nothing really special. They're pretty clearly taking after Dr. Manhattan here, and I think that does it okay. I really like the 80s Captain Atom book. I think this is a successor that isn't offensively bad. It is very different, but I think that's probably a good thing since that book already exists and rehashing it would not be good. Someone please tell Teen Titans writers that. Justice League of America's Vibe is a book focused on Justice League of America's Vibe. This book lasted 10 issues. The first 2 were written by Jeff Johns and Andre Kreisberg, and then Starling Gates took over for the other 8. Over the course of the book, the art was done by Pete Woods, Fabiano Neves, Andres Grinaldo, and Dirtles Santa Cruz. The first issue is his origin, and I actually personally quite like that one. From there, he just kind of does some stuff for Waller and Argus. And this includes stuff like seeing if his powers can interfere with the Speed Force by fighting Kid Flash. But eventually, this just gets sidetracked when he goes rogue because of Cynthia Reynolds, who has a more known name, but I'm not going to use it, and fights the Suicide Squad. Then he breaks out of captivity in a cameo fest. Then he hops dimensions, going to Gem World before ending up in another dimension to fight his final antagonist, which is his dead brother and also a woman named Mordeath. Then Cindy and Cisco blackmail Waller and keep working with her. This book's fine. It's kind of fun, but it's ultimately nothing special. Katana is a 10-issue book written by Ann Nocenti with a few different artists. On issues 1 and 2, it's Alex Sanchez, who also has a bit in 7 alongside Fabrizio Fiorentino. For the other 7 issues, it's Cliff Richards. This book spun out of Justice League of America and follows Katana's adventures on a secret Japanese neighborhood in San Francisco. Then she starts to deal with some groups of martial artists who seem to be equal parts attempting to kill and recruit her. The big one is the Sword Clan, who are responsible for killing her husband. There's also a lot of mystical stuff with Soul Taker, her sword. Eventually, it breaks during a fight with Killer Croc and unleashes the Creeper, an evil spirit that was trapped in the sword. She then has to fix her sword. This becomes the new plot, and the Sword Clan takes a backseat until the ghost of Katana's husband decides he doesn't love her anymore. Then stuff just kind of happens for the rest of the book. It doesn't even really get a proper conclusion, it just kind of ends. Every issue is worse than the last. I'm going to put an example on screen here. I don't know what one yet, but the dialogue here is pretty much all bad. Thematically, this book is all over the place. There's some stuff about femininity here, but it's just very clumsily handled. In general, a lot of things that I think are meant to be thematically important happen and then immediately get dropped. These are not the book's biggest issues, though. If you didn't exactly piece it together earlier when I was talking about the plot, this book is quite hard to follow. It's not good at letting you know what's happening, why it's happening, or having connective tissue between events. Plot points just kind of appear and get dropped. This book is bad. This book is very bad. It's the better of Ann Nocenti's 2 comics in this video. Mr. Terrific was a book focused on Michael Holt, which is the version of the character you probably know. This book lasted 8 issues. As for the creative team, Eric Wallace wrote it, and Roger Robinson and Gianluca Gugliotta did the art. In terms of content, the book starts with a story arc dealing with a telepath named Brainstorm who has unclear goals. There's also stuff here about a corporate takeover and an attempt to replace Michael as the CEO of his company. Neither of these is very well fleshed out. Then this changes to some stuff with him getting abducted by aliens and escaping. Then it just goes back to the corporate takeover stuff. This gets sidetracked by a couple of one-off issues as well. The dialogue in this book is quite bad. It is about half the quippy MCU stereotype and half just clumsy or unnatural sounding text. This is not helped by the stories not being terribly memorable or interesting. This book also has, and this is not a very easy thing to explain, it's paced in a way that it's like so rapid the story can't keep up. It's almost like it's skipping key parts of the story to get to the next part. This isn't enough to make it really confusing. It's just annoying because you've got to fill in the blanks. That's not the best explanation I can give, but I hope it makes sense. Overall, I would say this book is below average. It is not terribly good. It's not the worst thing ever. It's just kind of uninterestingly bad. Threshold was a sci-fi book written by Keith Giffen with art by Tom Rainey, Scott Collins, Timothy Green II, and Phil Winslade, although most of those artists are in the backups. This book ran for 8 issues. It follows an ex-Green Lantern named Jediah Call and a bunch of other characters, most of whom are spins on older DC space characters, and they're all on a lawless planet that prominently features a reality show where people are hunted for sport. Being completely honest, a lot happens in this book, and I'm not sure my summary covers everything well. It is the single longest summary in this book because I do feel like I have to get everything across. This book is very involved. This next bit where I detail just how dense it is about 0.5% of the script. That is not a joke. The plot starts with a big action scene that takes up most of the first issue. It's basically Jediah getting found out that he's a Green Lantern, and then he runs away with the help of a girl named Ember. Then a different woman named Pamira Sin, who is a new version of the founding Legion, not Legion of Superheroes, Legion member, Stealth, meets up with a new version of Space Ranger. We also get the reveal that the main villain of the book, at least in the big picture, is Lady Styx. In issue 2, Space Ranger and Stealth fight their way out of being surrounded, and Jaime Reyes, who's on the planet for some reason, is sent after Jediah. Jediah gets warned about that by a new version of Tommy Tomorrow and Ember. Then they fight. Jediah ends up fleeing before Jaime comes to his senses and leaves. Then Jediah meets a new version of Star Hawkins, who is a private investigator here. We also get introduced to a cybernetic rabbit named Carrot, New God Lonar, and Robot Ilda. Carrot and his crew are after Jediah's power battery, and Jediah is told by Star and Ilda where it is. Lonar introduces himself to Jaime, and they start working together. Carrot, Ilda, and Jediah all break into the palace of the guy who has it, but they end up getting abducted by Brainiac, and Ilda's body gets destroyed. On the ground, Stealth leaves Space Ranger and Tommy with Ember tagging along with her. They fight, and Ember gets killed by some hunters. Jediah breaks out of Brainiac's bottle and talks to him. Brainiac lets him leave. While he talked to him, Jediah uploaded Ilda's consciousness to his ship, letting her take control of the ship and then eventually him. She dies, but Jediah gets to leave with the city. He takes it back to the ground. We also learn that Ember can regenerate herself after death. It's not outright stated, but I'm pretty sure this is because her human body is like an extension of her real body, which is a tree. Lonar and Jaime show up again for a page where Lonar tells Jaime he can get him back to Earth and get rid of the Scarab. It's also revealed that Star Hawkins has backups of Ilda. Then the rest of the cast, sans Jediah, Carrot, who was in the bottle, and Star Hawkins, who's been moved to the backup, all meet up. Jediah gets a call from Adonis, the guy who runs the show, who patches him through to Lady Styx. They talk. He returns to the surface and then drops the bottle off. Then he immediately gets teleported away. Jaime and Lonar go to the site. Lonar starts a fight, goes into the bottle, and kills Adonis. This leads into the last issue, which is a meta joke. The reality show the cast features in gets cancelled. It's revealed that Jediah teleported into an office building, and the rest of the cast gets ambushed in the bar they hang out in and dragged off. Jediah gets explained to him. The entire thing was scripted to some extent with reality warping effects. Tommy Tomorrow is the showrunner. Tommy convinces Jediah that they'll get rebooted and things will go well, but then double crosses him, gets him killed, and takes the starring role for himself. It's outright stated that he's leading the rest of the cast to find Jediah's killer. This book also has 2 backups. The first one is Larfleeze. It starts with Larfleeze getting robbed. Then he interrogates his butler, a new version of Legion of Superheroes villain Pulsar Stargrave, who knows nothing. Then he goes to meet the Star Rovers, who are smugglers here. Then he fights Legion. Throughout this entire thing, there's this whole plot about Orange Lantern constructs showing up and attacking him. Eventually, Sade shows up and reveals that she's behind it all. Larfleeze defeats her. And then it ends in issue 5 with the reveal that Larfleeze actually destroyed all of his things. Once Larfleeze ends, Star Hawkins takes over for the last 3 issues. Honestly, it's just kind of him doing generic private investigator stuff with Ilda. It's nothing special or all that interesting. He also meets Lady Styx. Then he escapes her and is the person who ends up killing Jediah. Honestly, I enjoyed this book a lot more than I thought I would. There is a lot going on, almost too much, quite frankly. I'm not going to call it the best thing I ever read. I wouldn't call it anything beyond good, even. But it was entertaining enough and had enough going on that I enjoyed my time with it. I do think the main story was much better than the backups, which is a bit odd because people really seem to like that Larfleeze one. But I also like a lot of DC's non-Green Lantern cosmic stuff, so I'm probably very biased here. I do kind of wish some aspects of it, mostly the reality show, were more fleshed out since it kind of feels like it's just in the background to the detriment of the concept. The last issue is something I could see being very contentious. I kind of liked it though. I think it is an interesting concept. Unfortunately, it is used to abruptly end a series that got abruptly ended. I did look and see that this book got a mixed to bad reception, and this ending was definitely part of it. Larfleeze was a book by Keith Giffen and Jam DeMatteis with art by Scott Collins. It lasted a full 12 issues. Being completely honest, this was the last book I read, so I was a little checked out by this point. This is a direct sequel to the Larfleeze Backup and Threshold. It starts with Larfleeze depressed because he's lost all his stuff, as happened in the Threshold backup. His butler attempts to snap him out of it by getting him to talk about himself. What actually ends up working is a giant entity called the Lord of the Hunt, real name Nodowns, appears and has valuable things on him. Larfleeze fights him for those valuable things. This starts an extended story where Larfleeze, his butler, and a woman named Senna, who goes by Wanderer, fight Nodowns. Then it goes into a story where the Orange Lantern constructs start rebelling against him after Senna restores them to life. He escapes them and then fights a group of cosmic entities, including Nodowns, Senna, and a few others. This happens because they have his butler. Then Nort shows up and he deals with Larfleeze for a bit. Then Nort and Larfleeze and Senna, who defects because she wants to marry Larfleeze, fight the other entities and defeat them. There's some extra wrinkles in there, but that is the big points. Like Threshold, there is a lot going on, although it is much less than that book. To be honest, I didn't like this book very much. I thought a lot of the character-focused stuff around Larfleeze and his past was pretty good. I would have liked more than that, but I thought basically everything else was pretty weak. Hawk and Dove lasted 8 issues. It was drawn by Rob Liefeld the entire way through. Sterling Gates wrote the book until issue 6, after which Rob Liefeld took over the writing duties as well. This book is kind of funny because it sure follows the the pre-Flashpoint status quo. Dove is with Deadman and everything. Don Hall's dead. This is by far the most interesting thing about the book. It's really boring. There's some drama around Don Hall's relationship to Dawn, the new Dove. They fight a couple of villains. There's this weird scientist guy who wants to eliminate the American government. He shows up in like one issue. I think he was probably meant to be set up for later. He kind of doesn't do anything. And then there's also evil versions of themselves. The book is boring, it's ugly, and it just ends without much of a resolution. It's bad in the least interesting ways. Don't read it. If you're looking for something bad, it's not interesting. It's just bad. Static Shock's New 52 comic lasted 8 issues. The entire book was drawn by Scott McDaniel, who also wrote several issues, with John Rosum and Mark Bernardine also writing parts of the book. This book follows Static after he and his family moved to New York City. There, he interferes with a gangster named Joey Piranha, causing him and his allies, the Slate Gang, to swear revenge. It's a pretty basic plot. Eventually, Hardware and Technique show up to help. And for the last 2 issues, it's a pair of one-offs, one dealing with his sisters and one where he talks to the school psychologist. These last 2 issues, the best of the lot. If Bernardine, the writer for these 2 issues, could have kept going, I think the book could have found its footing and been pretty solid. As it is, though, the book isn't really anything special. It's passable, but it's not the greatest. It's one of the more forgettable of the lot, and nothing about it really sticks out all that much. The art, the writing, everything is just kind of okay. The Ravagers is a teen book spinning out of Teen Titans. It lasted 13 issues. It's written by Howard Mackey for issues 1 to 7, as well as the 0 issue, with Tom DeFalco also credited on issue 2. Then Michael Allen Nelson took over for the last 4, with Tony Bedard joining him for the last 2. I'm also pretty sure this book takes the first place, well, in this video at least, in the number of artists over the course of the book. There are 12 credited people just for pencils. The art in this was variously done by Ian Churchill, Tom Rainey, Kenneth Rocafort, Daniel Sampier, Stefano Marino, Julius Gopez, Tyler Kirkham, Daniel HDR, Eduardo Pansica, Geraldo Borges, Iguara, and Diogenes Neves. The team consists of new versions of Thunder and Lightning, as well as Beast Boy, Fairchild, Terra, and Ridge. They're running from Warblade and Ravager. Those two are working for Harvest, a very lame new 52 Teen Titans villain. Then just Brother Blood kind of becomes the main villain. This lasts for like 2 issues. Then the Ravagers try to get help from Niles Calder and meet Superboy. This encounter gets interrupted by a Terra and Beast Boy origin issue. Then Superboy joins the team, and Thunder gets injured, and they go to other Harvest bases. Lightning also dies in here somewhere and disappears from most of the book, and Superboy also leaves eventually. Lightning then eventually just comes back to the last story. I didn't notice she was missing for an entire issue. That's kind of just how little emphasis is given and how little she adds to this. Then after this story, there's a single issue with Ravager and Warblade. Then they kind of just align themselves with the team. Then Deathstroke shows up and just kills everyone, except Ravager and Beast Boy. In the chaos, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man is unleashed, and he fights the team. Fairchild learns she's a clone before dying, and then in the last couple of pages, she and the rest of their team are seen with Deathstroke in pods. They're probably clones. This book is not very good. It's not bad in an interesting way. It's just kind of bland. Blackhawks was a reinvention of DC's classic air combat team. Here, they're a UN task force dedicated to something. It might be anti-terrorism missions. At some point, they mentioned dealing with dangerous technology. They never actually establish what it is they do. Anyway, this book lasted 8 issues and was written by Mike Costa with art by Graham Nolan. They deal with a villain called Mother Machine. She's just kind of a weird robot girl. She wants to reshape the world in her image, generic supervillain plot. There's definitely some other plot hooks in here, and definitely other plot stuff happening, but none of them go anywhere and are just kind of there, so I don't really want to talk about them. They definitely do things I'm pretty sure are war crimes. They don't even deal with her in the end, by the way. The team gets disbanded and their base gets blown up. She's still out there and a problem, and would show up in a Metal Men story years later. In case it's not obvious from what I've just kind of said, this book is not good. It's bad. I'm honestly surprised it lasted 8 issues. None of the characters are interesting or even really all that distinct. I couldn't tell you anything about them except the gray guy with the gray-haired guy, not the gray guy. The gray-haired guy with the glasses also showed up in a different book I'm going to talk about later, Voodoo. That's kind of saying a lot that I didn't like this. I am the exact guy who would want a Blackhawk survival. I would read a book of fun airplane adventures. I am the target audience for this. I hated it. GI Combat was an anthology book featuring 3 stories throughout its entire run. The book ran for 8 issues. The first story is a new version of the classic War That Time Forgot. If you don't know what that is, it's Soldiers Fight Dinosaurs. This was written by J.T. Kroll with art by Ariel Olivetti. It's pretty much just soldiers investigating an anomaly in North Korea. Then they get attacked by dinosaurs. It ran through issue 0, which is the 5th issue chronologically. It's really nothing to it, really. It's just kind of an action book that's pretty to look at. There's barely anything going on, and it's nothing special. Story 2 is the only one that ran through the entire book. Well, sort of. It's focused on the unknown soldier. Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti are writing this one, with Dan Panosian doing the art. For the last 3 issues, Staz Johnson takes over the art. The first bit is sort of an origin story that then transitions into a more standard action comic. It's probably the most ambitious story in this specific book. It's very of its time, but it's got the most going on with a few interesting ideas. It's not bad, but it's not great either. I would be open to reading more of it, though, personally. I could see this book getting very good as it goes on and finds its stride. There are 2 stories here, again. The first is much better than the second, but I am willing to chalk that up to a fairly rushed conclusion. The second story is not great. Story 3 is focused on the Haunted Tank. This is written by Peter Tomasi with art by Howard Chaykin. This follows the namesake tank, which is possessed by the ghost of Confederate General Jeb Stuart. The tank recruits his 98-year-old grandchild to save another one of his descendants, the great-grandchild of said grandchild, who was a prisoner of war in Afghanistan. Honestly, the most bizarre part of this is it teases a bunch of Golden Age nonsense that happened in the past in the New 52. I don't think this ever gets addressed, but it's kind of funny that people just immediately started bringing back nonsense like Haunted Tank. They even fight a war wheel in this book, which is, the most iconic DC war vehicle. It's piloted by the grandson of Rommel and fueled by the cybernetically enhanced body of Rommel. This is the type of nonsense I love. This book was fine, though. A story, rather. Honestly, it sounds a lot more interesting than it is. It shares a lot of its issues with The War That Time Forgot, which is mostly that it's very short and doesn't really make the best use of its time. Both of them are not the worst about it in this, but it doesn't really, in my opinion at least, have enough time to really get into what would make it interesting. Infinity Man and the Forever People is a 9-issue book written by Keith Giffen and Dan DiDio, with art by Keith Giffen, Tom Grummett, Jim Starlin, Philip Tan, and Daniel HDR. To probably very few people's surprise, this book follows Infinity Man and the Forever People, mostly the Forever People. In this book, that consists of Big Bear, Serafina, Viken, Mark, Moonrider, and Beautiful Dreamer. Here, Big Bear is a mentor figure for the rest of the team. They go through a few stories, which include one about a farm featuring Mantis. This is where the Infinity Man first appears. They are charged with healing a Mantis by the Infinity Man. This gets interrupted by a Future's End tie-in. Then they just fight Guy Gardner, Simon Baz, and Chip. This is a tie-in to an event almost no one remembers called Godhead. Then they briefly fight a man named Dr. Scuba, whom Serafina gets water powers. She gave them to him, not gets what. Yeah, you get it. Then the book ends with them fighting a new team of new gods called the Femme Fatales, who are cultists dedicated to Darkseid's father, Yuga Khan. Then the final issue is just Infinity Man telling Big Bear his backstory. To be honest, though, I did like this book. It's pretty simple. It's solid enough. It's nothing special, but it's a decent time. The New 52 Lobo book lasted 14 issues, 13 ongoing and 1 annual. This book was written by Colin Bunn, with art by Joelle Jones, Riley Brown, Alison Borge, Cliff Richards, Robson Rocha, Simon Kudransky, and Ethan Van Sciver over the course of its run. Just kind of rip the Band-Aid off. This book follows Twink Lobo. This is a decision nobody really seems to like. He's very edgy. I will say I do get what this is going for. It's an attempt to modernize the character. Unfortunately, Lobo doesn't really need that. Wolverine, the Punisher, and comically masculine action heroes do still exist and are still popular. Twink Lobo kind of hangs over this book no matter how you put it. This book starts with Lobo hunting down 8 of the universe's most dangerous killers. They want to destroy the Earth. And this entire first arc is really formulaic. Lobo goes to a place and kills people. There's stuff about the death of Zarnia, or Sarnia. I'm not really sure how it's pronounced. That's Lobo's homeworld. It's shown during this, and it contrasts with the story of the Earth. It's honestly a pretty decent idea for establishing Lobo's backstory, but I'm not entirely sure it's the best pairing of stories to do that. These two eventually combine as Lobo meets another assassin who is connected to Zarnia and the last resident of her planet, which is colonized by Zarnian dissidents, not descendants, and also died out when the Zarnians did. This is the first antagonist Lobo loses to, and he has a personal issue with her because she takes credits for the death of their planets, and she claims she was paid for it. Lobo is mad because he did it, and he didn't get paid. So he tries to find out who did. This gets sidetracked, and he works with a different organization where he hunts down and then works with Sinestro. He kills some established lanterns during this. Most notably, this does include Dexter and Atrocitus. They get better by the end of the issue. This is the weakest part of the book. Then the last two issues, they close out the story with a rushed, rough resolution. Lobo just gets drugged, goes insane, and fights Hal Jordan for like a long time. Honestly, though, this book was refreshing because it had a lot more time to breathe. The fact that it wasn't that short really worked in its favor for me. It was super different from a lot of the other stuff I read for this. It was all right. It was fun in a kind of stupid, schlocky way. This isn't high art. This isn't essential reading, but it is fun. Up next, we have Men of War. It's a military-themed anthology book that lasted 8 issues, and I believe it is the book in here with the most stories in it. Over those 8 issues, there's several. I don't want to count. Anyway, the first story is Sergeant Rock. It's written by Ivan Brandon and has art by Tom Derenick. It follows Joe Rock on a mission that goes poorly when a superhuman shows up. And then complications happen. The superhuman is Cersei, by the way. This is where she first appeared in the New 52. Then he gets a second story. In this one, he and his team go on a mission. Then one of them explodes. Then, they've encountered some immortal soldiers and have to escape them. This has a version of the classic DC war character Gravedigger. This feature lasts until issue 6. It's okay. The backup part of the first 3 issues is a 3-parter called Navy SEALs Human Shields. This was written by Jonathan Vankin with art by Phil Winslade. The story just kind of has them doing counterinsurgency stuff. It's really not that interesting. Once Navy SEALs is done, a new backup called Skull Bots picks up. This is written by B. Claymore with art by Paul McCaffrey. This lasts 1 issue and is just about the army using some flawed mechs. It's like 6 pages. There's nothing to it. The second to last backup for the Sergeant Rock portion of this book is called Knife Fight. It was written by Matt Kinnott with art by Patrick Scherberger. This follows the thoughts of a man and a woman who are in a drawn-out knife fight. This one's actually okay. It's nothing really all that special, but it's better than a lot of what else is in this book. The final of the backups for the first 6 issues is called A Last Full Measure. It's by John Arcudi and his art by Richard Corbian. It follows a bunch of Civil War reenactors who get possessed by dead Confederates and kill a couple of reenactors on the Union side. Then a Union ghost shows up and banishes them. To be honest, I think this is a decent idea for a story. I think it could be really good. It'd be better suited to something much longer. This does not have the space to do much of anything with it. Then in issue 7, the format changes up a little. It's split into 2 stories instead of having 1 main and 1 backup. I actually like this more. I think it gives the what would have been a backup some time to actually do something, because these backups are so short. The first story in issue 7 is about some SAS troops reflecting on their time in Afghanistan. A lot of it takes place in a poppy field. This is by James Robinson with art by Phil Winslade. The second story in issue 7 is about a veteran thinking about his downed helicopter in Iraq, juxtaposed with his day-to-day life after returning home. This is written by J.T. Kroll with art by Scott Collins. It's honestly one of the better things in this book. And then there is the final issue, which changed up the format yet again. This one is just a single story. Honestly, it's probably the best issue of the run. It's a single story, as I said, written by Jeff Lemire with art by Matt Kint. This follows Frankenstein and G.I. Robot on a mission during the Second World War. They fight a little, then fight a kaiju weaponized by the Japanese. Overall, though, I would say this book has a lot going on, and very little of it is good. Most of it's kind of bad. Last 2 issues are pretty easily the best, but even then they aren't anything exceptional. OMAC was an 8-issue book written by Dan Dio and Keith Giffen. The art was also done by Giffen, with the exception of 1 issue, which was done by Scott Collins. There's also a crossover with Frankenstein, Agent of Shade, which does change the issue count a little. This book follows Kevin Coe, a scientist at Cadmus who is transformed into OMAC by Brother Eye. Brother Eye then uses him to get back at Cadmus and Checkmate, who had imprisoned him. There's also some other Jack Kirby stuff in here, like the Evil Factory, some members of Commandee's supporting cast, and like Simeon and Makari. It's a pretty simple plot and really nothing all that special. And honestly, that's more or less what I have to say about this book. It's not bad, but it's nothing special. The ending feels a little abrupt and unsatisfying, but the book did get canceled, and that's not unique. A lot of the books in this video have that. Star Spangled War Stories, more properly known as Star Spangled War Stories featuring G.I. Zombie, is an 8-issue book with one Future's End tie-in. This book was written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti with art by Scott Hampton. This book follows G.I. Zombie, now an FBI agent, as he works to take down a militia with his partner. His name is Jared. The Future's End tie-in has him working to stop a zombie plague too, but it's a Future's End tie-in, so that doesn't really matter. It was released between issues 2 and 3. After the tie-in, we get to see how things got to the point of Future's End, which is him fighting like rabies zombies in a small town, and the small town gets razed to contain it. Eventually, he just breaks into the militia's compound and kills a lot of them, stopping their plans to make more rabies zombies to destroy the government. He actually raids 2 compounds over this. This book's okay. I don't have a lot to say about this one. A member of his supporting cast is this video's second version of Gravedigger, by the way. That's kind of fun. Team 7 is a revival of a Wildstorm team. This iteration features Deathstroke, Amanda Waller, Steve Trevor, Majestic, Alex Fairchild, Black Canary, and Grifter. There are also a couple of other minor characters in the mix, like Kurt Lance and John Lynch. This book is set 5 years before the present day and deals with a team that was set up to counter superheroes, despite them not really existing at that point in New 52 continuity, but whatever. This book lasted 9 issues, including a 0 issue, and it was written by Justin Jordan, with Tony Bedard also contributing to the last 2. There are quite a few artists on this as well. It's Julius Gopez, Cliff Richards, Nathan Eyring, Juan Castro, Pascal Alix, and Jesus Marino. The story of this book is pretty basic. The team just kind of goes around and does stuff to deal with various superhuman threats. This pretty much just means Eclipso. Once he's done, they do some stuff with Spartan, Kaizen Gamora, and a prosthetics research lab. This also involves Ladytron, Caitlin Fairchild, and the New 52 version of Hank Henshaw. It's got this sort of body horror bent that almost works. The second story also acts as the New 52's version of Majestic's origin story. The last issue also just kind of drops the concept that the team had its DNA messed with. To my knowledge, this isn't ever followed up on, but I don't know that for sure because I haven't read every New 52 book. Overall, this book is just kind of not good. It's got a lot of bad dialogue, and just a lot of the sequences, the big action sequences, aren't very good. There are a lot of characters. Most of them don't do anything. I could not tell you something that most of the cast does. If you ask me, hey, what does Steve Trevor do? I wouldn't tell you because I forgot he was in the book until I edited the text. There's barely anything distinguishing characters from other characters, or even a generic action movie sidekick outside of the outfits, of which only really Grifter and Deathstroke stick out. Even the characters that do things don't really do anything interesting or notable. It gets better after Eclipso, but it's never really good. It's not a great book. The Green Team Teen Trillionaires was an 8-issue book by Franco and Art Balthazar with art by Iguara. This book is about a whole bunch of rich kids. There's Muhammad Katani, a prince, Commodore Murphy, who's just kind of generally and generically rich, Cecilia Sunbeam, who is an actress, J.P. Houston, who has oil money, and J.P.'s sister, Lucia. There's also Muhammad's bodyguard, but he and the sister are just kind of there. The book starts with all of them meeting at a secret expo where people present new technologies to them in hopes of getting investments. Muhammad's just live, tweeting the entire thing with GPS tagging. So a guy shows up and tries to kill Commodore, who reveals an Iron Man nanite suit, that thing. It's a guy named Riot. Cecilia also has one of these suits, and then she and JP get separated from the group. They wind up in a hotel room, and she ends up with a robot arm in the morning. The other group does some stuff with Deathstroke, who makes a deal with Muhammad. They meet Riot there, and he's revealed to be Commodore's father, and that's that first arc. The second one, there's a meteor. They're just dealing with it. Icicle is there, and he's attempting to get it to hit Earth for a guy named Belichick Temple, who was not established before this. This just happens. Cecilia dies in the process of this, and JP transforms into a Sasquatch. They're seeing each other on the side, and he goes on a rampage. The other people who use the nanite suits also get powers. Muhammad gets like energy and phasing powers. Commodore gets telekinesis, and Cecilia can become intangible and invisible. Also, she was fine the entire time. Also, she got her arm back via the suit. They all get code names, but they don't matter. They beat Riot again, who is back. And then Commodore attempts to buy the Teen Titans on the last page. This book isn't very good. It's not terribly interesting. The characters have nothing going on. The story is very disjointed. There are points where things just kind of happen, and there's not really much of any connective tissue between those things. The Movement was a 12-issue book written by Gail Simone with art by Freddie Williams Jr. This book follows a group of superheroes inspired by the, at the time, contemporary protest movements like Occupy Wall Street. The roster of this book is Mouse, who can control rats, Virtue, who has some emotion-based powers, Vengeance Moth, a woman in a wheelchair who can make energy projection things, Tremor, who has vibration powers, and Catharsis, who has mechanical wings. Another guy named Burden also joins the book. He has demon powers. This book starts with some hackers and some police officers who attempt to take advantage of a 16-year-old. The hackers expose them, and then there's some stuff with the serial killer. The movement intervene, and some stuff happens, which results in them taking the two cops from the start of the book prisoner. Then they do some stuff and encounter Rainmaker, who they think is the serial killer. While this is happening, Catharsis is getting beaten up by cops. After a scuffle, Rainmaker joins them for the rest of the issue and then immediately leaves the book for the most part. Then we get a lot of backstory. The only really interesting bit in here is that Tremor is working for Amanda Waller. They also learn that the main villain is a local developer. He's also the serial killer's dad. He hires a bunch of mercenaries, and Tremor busts the cops out, and there's a big fight. And the mercenaries attack their base, then they fight Batgirl, then they go fight Burton's brother before the last issue hastily wraps everything up. This book is kind of directionless. It's a little hard to explain, but a lot of this book is pretty meandering. The characters aren't compelling, and the story is not that interesting. It's just kind of a book that exists. I will also say that it has aged a little interestingly. That is all I will say on the matter. It has aged interestingly. Voodoo was a 13-issue book focused on the Wildstorm character of the same name. The entire book was drawn by Sammy Bastard, but there were two writers on it. Issues 1 through 4 were written by Ron Mars, and issues 6 through 0, which is the 13th issue released, were written by Joshua Williamson. Priscilla, the main character, starts as a stripper. Then, at the end of issue 1, it's revealed that she can transform into an alien form, which is her true form, and she kills a federal agent. The book then starts dealing with the consequences of this. Honestly, I think this is a really strong start. As someone who's not that familiar with the character, this immediately got me interested. It definitely helps. This is a very, very good-looking book. And then just kind of builds on this presence and gradually reveals more and more information about what's going on. The Mars part of the book is very solid. It does a great job of setting up this engaging, almost espionage story. And then there's a pretty noticeable and big shift when Williamson takes over. I'm not really sure I like it that much. I do think the Mars parts are much, much stronger, but it is a fairly cohesive book that's decent enough. I enjoyed reading it, but it's nothing special. I think it might also raise some strange questions regarding modern canon, but that is not a unique thing in this era, and since it's been ignored, those concerns can also be ignored. Resurrection Man was a 13-issue book following the titular character. It was written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. The art was done by Fernando Deguino, Fernando Blanco, Jesus Saez, Andres Guinaldo, and Javier Pina. This starts with Mitch going on a plane that then crashes. And he learns there's a whole lot of interest in claiming his soul from both angels and devils. Then he fights the body doubles. This lasts a while, and he eventually just gets help from an old supervillain named the Transhuman. He is more permanently killed by an angel, and we learn some backstory. Then he revives and just gets sent to Arkham. He breaks out, but there's like a warning about him because he's potentially dangerous. He goes to Metropolis, fights a supervillain, and then decides to try and figure out who he is. And there's a Suicide Squad crossover. And there's a new supporting character here, but she doesn't really matter that much. Then he starts looking for Transhuman, and the Angels and the Devils give him a deal to get a little more time. He ends up eventually just getting captured by the government agency that has been looking for him, and that's who the body doubles work for. He escapes, and the guy who was heading up the agency and Transhuman both die, and a second version of him shows up. This is resolved in the Zero issue. The Mitch we've been following was from an arm that got disposed of. The original Mitch is dying. So Armor Mitch sacrifices the original soul to get the angels off his back, and the demon teases a sequel that never existed. I did like this book, though. It was a fun little romp. Sword of Sorcery was a 9-issue book following Amethyst of Gemworld. This book was written by Christy Marks and had art from Aaron Lopestri. There are also a couple of other backups by different creators. The main story of the book starts with Amethyst, a civilian named Amy Winston, a teenager, who is moving, and she's like moving between places. Then she and her mom go into another dimension, and then John Constantine steals the crystal that lets them do that. Her and her mom move around in Gemworld a little, and her evil aunt learns about her. Then they do some training, meet some people, and her mom and aunt just start fighting. They go to war. While this happens, Amy leaves Gemworld. She does some stuff in the Justice League Dark book, but eventually she goes to Chicago and gets abducted by an unnamed CEO who wants her magical necklace to get more power. She wins and then returns to Gemworld, where she learns about her father, and her mom is seriously injured by some assassins. Meanwhile, Constantine sends Eclipso to Gemworld and blows up the crystal, the portal crystal that is. Eclipso then just kind of goes around systematically killing people. Then Amethyst and her supporting cast defeat him, and the book ends. It's a bit abrupt, but the story's alright. It's a fun enough adventure story. It does have some problems with jumping around, and a couple of the issues towards the beginning are quite boring, but it's decent enough. Nothing really all that special, but also nothing terrible. The first backup is Beowulf. The creative team for this is Tony Bedard and Jesus Saiz. This is just kind of a post-apocalyptic retelling of the first part of the story of Beowulf, basically right up until Grendel's mother dies. It's honestly pretty solid, but not all that interesting to talk about because this is just Beowulf. This runs from issue 0, the first issue of the book, to issue 3. Starting in issue 4, the Beowulf backup gets replaced by a Stalker backup. It's by Mark Andreyko with art by Andre Bassan. Follows Stalker, an immortal killer for hire and former king who's made a deal with the devil and is now working for him. He's given his final mission, which is to kill a woman named Clarissa. She is the pregnant reincarnation of his wife. He goes rogue, and the devil takes issue with that. She dies, and Stalker takes the baby and runs. He then recruits a priest to help banish the devil, but at the end, Stalker gets banished to a mysterious place, and the baby gets possessed by the devil. This backup runs from issues 4 to 7, leaving issue 8, the book's final issue, without a backup. Huntress was a 6-issue limited series by Paul Levitz with art by Marcus Toe. This book features Helena Wayne, the alternate universe daughter of Batman and Catwoman, going to Naples and dealing with a human trafficking mafioso. After that, there's some various twists and turns, and this eventually results in her dealing with the dictator of a North African country. The ending of this book has Power Girl in it and directly leads into the World's Finest ongoing. I'm not entirely sure, since this book is fairly obscure, but I pretty strongly suspect this was a holdover from pre-crisis material that was ever so slightly edited, so it features Helena Wayne instead of Bertinelli. It's published less than a month after the reboot and is thoroughly irrelevant to the status quo there, although that could also just be tied to the reboot's famously rough approach. This book is fine. It's nothing special, but if you're interested in the concept of the character, it's worth reading. It's very pretty, but it's just kind of okay. There was also a New 52 Night Force revival. That's an obscure magic team. You may have heard of them. This book was written by the team's original creator, Tom Wolfman, Marv Wolfman, with art by Tom Mandrake. This book was 7 issues long. This book follows Baron Winters, who is the most prominent member of Night Force by far, as he attempts to protect a young girl pursued by supernatural forces related to the founding fathers of the United States. Now, I'm trying to keep this as vague as possible here because I did actually really like this book, and I think a lot of why it is interesting to me is the story and like how it unfolds. So I'm just going to kind of keep this a little vague. I thought this book was good. It's not the best thing in the world, but it was engaging and a decent enough read. If you think it sounds interesting, I'd say it's probably worth checking out. Up next, we have a trio of Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti books that I think were supposed to set up a new incarnation of the Freedom Fighters. The first one here is Ray. None of these really go anywhere, I should probably say that. This book was drawn by Jamal Igle and ran for 4 issues. This one follows a Korean American named Lucian Gates who gets hit by an energy beam and is mutated. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I actually really like his design. Anyway, he just kind of deals with his powers and some interpersonal drama stuff. There's some hints to some like themes and ideas about identity here, but the book is so short that it doesn't really get time to explore these, which is a shame. He ends up fighting an evil immortal movie director from the 50s who has a god-awful costume, by the way. Lucian hypnotizes him so he's no longer evil and instead follows his dreams. Then he gets recruited by Uncle Sam. This particular book is fine. It's 4 issues. It's super short. It's more than almost anything in here, lacking the time to really explore the character and the ideas. Some of the supporting cast are fun, but they aren't given enough time to really develop. Most of my problems with this book are because it is 4 issues and was clearly building to a payoff that never happened. To be clear, this is an issue I have with all 3 of these books, and I will not be repeating it with the other 2. The second of the Gray and Palmiotti Freedom Fighters books is Phantom Lady and Dollman. This is also 4 issues and was drawn by Cat Staggs. This book follows Jennifer Knight, the daughter of a journalist, and his wife, who were killed after investigating a Metropolis-based mobster. She's going after that mobster for revenge. One of her longtime friends, Dane Maxwell, is in love with her and attempts to strike a deal with the mobster. This backfires and he gets shrunk down to a tiny size. Dane then rescues her since she was caught by the mobster, and she gets a super suit that gives her the standard Phantom Lady powers, as well as phasing and also dark physical light power stuff. They fight a supervillain, then bust the guy and get recruited by Uncle Sam. This book isn't really great or anything. It's fine. There's a weirdly high amount of sex jokes because that is the Phantom Lady brands, but like, it's fine. The third and final book of the Palmiotti and Gray Freedom Fighters books is Human Bomb. This one also lasted 4 issues and had art by Jerry Ordway. This book follows Michael Taylor, a former Marine who can explode. He was captured and experimented on by Crown, a group of terrorists that turn out to be aliens. He teams up with Uncle Sam to stop them. He does this with someone who is meant to be a new version of Miss America. She dies in issue 4. Then he blows up the moon the aliens are on, gets rescued by Kyle Rayner, and joins the Freedom Fighters for their future non-existent adventures. This is the weakest of the 3 Freedom Fighters books. I did not like this one at all. It is a dud. Now, if you've done this in one sitting, you might remember a comic I mentioned at the start, one of the worst things I've ever read. This is it. Clarion, a 6-issue miniseries by Ann Nocenti with art by Trevor McCarthy. This book follows Clarion as he leaves his home and goes around dealing with some magical stuff. I think it has a big magic versus technology angle. I think it's sort of a coming of age story. It's a little hard to describe, but this book feels almost like it starts in the middle of the plot. This book is absurdly hard to follow, it's confusing, and there are things that just kind of happen. It feels like a fever dream, and not in a positive way. I genuinely do not know where to start with the plot on this one because I barely know what the plot is. I cannot think of a way to describe it that just isn't Clarion leaves home and then has wacky adventures. There's things that are just kind of said and never shown, so that's fun. What I think might be one of the biggish themes just comes out of nowhere in the middle of issue 4. As I said, it's sort of a coming of age story, but in this issue, there's just an entire other conflict added for some reason. There's this new thing between the people Clarion is staying with and the devil guy who got him there. I think this is meant to represent something with the coming of age stuff, like the conflict between family and this sort of like reckless individualism. But it's extremely clumsily handled, comes out of nowhere, and then is just immediately dropped after a few pages. Even the magic versus technology stuff that was like sort of a theme gets dropped before the last issue, or in the last issue rather, because why not, I guess. I'm honestly very tempted to throw this on the pile of video subjects to talk about it in more detail because it is horrible, but in a strangely compelling way. I cannot recommend that you read this. Again, it is one of the worst things I have ever read. It's hard to articulate just how bad it is and why it's so bad, and I want to give it another attempt. I don't really have much to say about this, though, and as kind of as the conclusion. This was an experience. I cannot recommend you do the same thing. I definitely read more bad comics than good ones. The lows were very, very low, and the highs were just kind of alright, but nothing exceptional. If you've read any of these books and you have some sort of input, feel free to let me know. I am curious what other people thought of them.